Episode 32, The Ultrarunning King, Scott Jurek. Welcome to The Art of Excellence, a show about people doing extraordinary things in their lives. I'm your host, Glenn Zweig. Thanks for joining me. My guest today is Scott Jurek. Scott is widely regarded as one of the greatest runners of all time. He has won most of ultrarunning's elite events, including the Hardrock 100, the Badwater 135, and the Western States 100-mile endurance run, which he has won a record 7 straight times. His most recent accomplishment is his 2015 Appalachian Trail speed record, averaging nearly 50 miles a day for 46 days. He is a New York Times-bestselling author, and his latest book is called North: Finding My Way While Running the Appalachian Trail. Scott, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, Scott, why do you run?
I mean, it's a long answer. It's multifaceted. It's one that's changed throughout the years. I think initially my early days of running, it was a new challenge. I actually used to hate running, and it was only something that I did to get in shape for other sports, and wasn't really something that I guess I had a passion for. And then that reignited when I got into trail running and was training for Nordic skiing and spending time out in the woods and the trails. It's where I grew up in northern Minnesota. It seemed kind of natural since I was a hunting and fishing boy and loved building forts out in the woods and building trails. So it really wasn't until I got acquainted with trail running and realized that I could blend these two passions that I had. And I guess, to be honest, initially it was to challenge myself, to really push the envelope of what I thought was possible. A buddy of mine and a bunch of friends actually decided, hey, we're going to, do this 50-miler. And it was something, I guess, at 20 years old, for some reason, I thought, yeah, I want to try that. I want to see what I can do. And for somebody that hadn't run a marathon or even run, anything longer than probably a half marathon at that point, it was this just, I guess, other world out there, and just something so fascinating. Like, wow, people run 50 miles at a shot. So I was on the starting line of a marathon a few months later, and then 1 month later ran my first 50-miler. And since then, it's been this exploration of challenging myself, but also I feel like I get most tapped into that primitive state of just survival, really putting myself in a situation that's uncomfortable sometimes, and going out into the beyond. And I think as humans, we have that natural instinct of wanting to explore, but also be connected with our surroundings. And trail running has allowed me to do all those things.
Because obviously, if it's just about exercise, you can go out a few times a week and run a few miles and you're pretty good. But once you get into the types of mileage, you're talking about, it's way beyond exercise and good health at that point. It seems like it's something that you need that you're not getting out of other areas in your life. Is that fair?
Definitely. I feel for a lot of people, I think it's with a lot of things. Like, why do humans in general want to challenge themselves or be uncomfortable, for that matter? I feel like in today's modern world, especially in the Western world, or countries that are very fortunate to have, I guess, easier living, so to speak. But humans in general feel this sense of like, I want to feel uncomfortable, as unnatural as it is, as much as we've become comfortable with, being in a room that's temperature controlled, being able to jump in a car or other modes of transportation, get from one place to another very quickly without expending any energy, hardly. I feel like there is this instinctual drive to want to put oneself into a survival state, and definitely running ultramarathons is a way to do that. Now, it's a very voluntary choice, and again, it can be something that mentally is hard for people to do, especially, exercise is not something people typically enjoy. So to go out and do that, and I think people do that with their other passions, whether it's work or art. You can challenge oneself from a physical or mental component, and maybe even spiritual aspect. in other forms. But for me, running has been that vehicle of exploration and that vehicle of transformation, of seeing what I can do. And, some might argue it's not maybe healthy, or it's beyond the health aspects, but I do feel I'm most balanced when I'm running. Do I need to run 50 or 100 miles or run the Appalachian Trail? Probably not, but there's a benefit of going out past the edge of what we think is possible. And I'm a big believer in that.
I want to go back to the very, very beginning. Growing up, you carried a heavy burden of having to take care of your family at a pretty young age, starting when your mom was diagnosed with MS and your father was working a lot, not always there, not always available. It's a lot of responsibility for a child. What was that like, and how did that shape you?
I think it was a big part of my growth as an individual and as a human being. One is forced to grow up very quickly when whether it's chronic disease or a major traumatic event. And definitely having a mother with multiple sclerosis and seeing her struggle with that starting, around 5 or 6 years old. And then having to be a caregiver, and having a younger brother and sister. And it definitely shaped me. I like to say that experience, as hard and as difficult and as maybe, it robbed me of some of my, easier childhood years, or just playful childhood years. It shaped me into who I am, but I also believe it helped turn me into an ultramarathon, probably more than running miles through the woods and mountains. It was really that experience. And I feel like those are sometimes experiences, when I mentioned earlier about being uncomfortable and pushing our boundaries. Sometimes we get forced, discomfort upon our lives, and we have to deal with that one way or another. And people deal with that in different ways. And so for me, at a young age, I had to deal with it in a very effective and healthy way. Otherwise, life was going to be pretty tough if I didn't figure that out. So I think it definitely forced me to grow up, but it forced me to, there was a lot of growth that occurred there, in terms of personal growth and psychological growth. And I feel like that prepared me for a lot of things in life.
Do you draw strength as well from having watched your mother go through that and the struggles she went through and fighting through the pain as it got worse and worse? Is that something that somehow has forged some sort of toughness inside of you, do you think?
Oh, definitely. For a lot of my running career, as well as even now, I mean, she has since passed away. And, I always thought, hey, I have this ability to move my body. Maybe I have an injury here and there. And I mentioned this in the book North on the Appalachian Trail, how, it was easy sometimes to feel sorry for myself, or feel like, oh, I'm in so much pain. I have this, torn quadricep on one side, and I have a basically glaring runner's knee, chondromalacia patella on the other side. And it would be real easy for me sometimes to just wallow in that self-pity and pain. And then I would think about my mother and think about the struggles that she had. And I think it's good to have an intention, or a cause, or somebody that we're offering up our chosen suffering, or, elective suffering to. And it's definitely put a different perspective. And I mentioned this in North as well, how there were so many people that came out on the trail and changed my perspective. There was a gentleman who had cancer, and he had just survived leukemia earlier that spring, and he told himself he was going to run 30 miles with me. And it just changed my whole outlook for the rest of the day, and actually for several days after that, because my perspective shifted. And I think perspective and having that understanding that there's always somebody who has things worse than you, and life can be tougher for them, and putting a different twist mentally on maybe the challenges that we encounter can be very helpful. And I found that to be very helpful, and just remembering that, life isn't that bad. In fact, it's actually pretty damn good right now.
I've heard you say before that you believe anyone is capable of doing an ultra marathon. Do you really believe that?
Well, definitely. I feel that's one unique thing about ultramarathons. People assume that we're like running, at a blazing fast speed. And definitely if you're trying to win the race, it can seem like those paces are quite fast for the average runner. But when you look at the overall distances, humans were built for endurance. We were built for ultra endurance. And as ultra runners, we are hiking, power walking up hills. We're not going at a sprinting pace. And I feel like that's something that people probably who don't know anything about ultramarathoning should understand, that it's really about enduring. And that's why so many people come to the sport with backgrounds, not necessarily as years and years of runners and running experience. A lot of them come from military backgrounds. A lot of them come from a career where they've had to work under a lot of stress. Some people come from addiction. Some people come from taking care of children and being at home and just or birthing children, for that matter. Women are phenomenal ultramarathoners because of their not only pain tolerance but just their ability to endure. And I think that's the human, I guess, condition in general, is that we crave endurance, and ultra endurance is something that does come very natural despite what people are thinking. So if you can walk and you can jog the downhills, you can run an ultramarathon. And I'm a firm believer in that. And I've seen so many people over the years transform their lives through doing something that seems so far out of their realm. And that's a gift. That's an ability to go out and try something like that and face failure and face something that seems so insurmountable.
Well, you don't just run these ultramarathons. I mean, you have taken on over your career the most extreme ultra runs you can imagine, 100, 150-mile runs in all sorts of extreme conditions, mountainous conditions, extreme heat. You win them again and again and again. And for many years, you were certainly, arguably, the best runner in the world. Why you? What is it you have? What did you do to get to that position that others, which were just as motivated, just as driven, didn't do?
I think it's an ability to perform in a very high tension situation. And I mean that by when I was at the peak of my career trying to win Western States 100 every year, and to do that 7 years in a row, everyone assumes that I had 7 years of perfect races. And that's very far from the truth. In fact, one year I ran on a sprained ankle for 50 miles. One year I was, vomiting like crazy, extreme heat exhaustion from the temperatures, 100 plus degrees. Every year every race has its own challenges. And I think the ability to deal with those challenges mentally, often more than physically, was my best attribute. And, relating it back to growing up with, my mother's situation and her struggle with MS, that probably prepared me more for that than anything, because I didn't have a choice. I had to find a way through and find a way to get to the other side of, just the daily challenges that arose, and her inability to do the things that a mother would typically do around the home. And so for me, in an ultramarathon situation, I think is, being familiar with that mentally, as well as knowing and being adaptable with my body physically. Sure, it took a lot of training, and I'm not going to lie, I had to train my butt off, put myself through physical challenges. But a lot of times those physical challenges, I was preparing my mind more than anything. In the workouts that I did, in the way that I was looking at strength and looking at my nutrition, and just making sure I had that whole set of tools for going out there on race day, and then figuring out what I needed to do as problems arose. Because that's the one thing with an ultramarathon, it's not over and done with in a matter of seconds or minutes or even hours. Sometimes they're a full day or more, and that can be, I guess, the difference between people that win races and people that end up dropping out. Because I've dropped out of races. I know what it's like not to put everything together. I just feel like I've been able to do that through training and preparation, but also through race day. And when it comes down to performing, being adaptable and being able to adjust my mental state and that mindset of what I need to do to get through the situation that I'm dealing with.
Let's talk about the book. The title again is North, Finding My Way While Running the Appalachian Trail. I take it you're not so much referring to finding your way in the literal sense.
No, I mean, it does help to find your way when you're traveling over 2,000 miles on the Appalachian Trail, and you definitely don't want to get lost too many times. Otherwise, you're putting in bonus miles, as we spoke about earlier before the show. And you said you ran a marathon that they tacked on another mile. So definitely there were times when I needed to really make sure I was on the trail. But in terms of finding my way, I think it means finding at least I've always let people figure out what that means for them in the title. But for me, it meant finding a way through, finding a way not only to get to Katahdin and the end of the Appalachian Trail, but also what it meant to get through the situations and the challenges that I was dealing with in life. And, the just everyday, I guess, mental struggle of putting one foot in front of the other, of getting out and putting in another 50 miles each day. So I think, yeah, for me, it really was, finding a way. And for a lot of people that can be different things, but for me it was, how do I get through the struggle, and how do I get to that ease and that just free floating state that I've always enjoyed about running. And that's, gets back to your earlier question of why do I run? It's for those times when I feel like I can run forever, of getting in that state. And some people use running or movement as a form of meditation. And for me, it's definitely been a part of that too. Despite seemingly how much physical discomfort you have to go through when you're putting 50 miles a day on the Appalachian Trail, there was a lot of enjoyment and comfort and ease out there, despite all the challenge.
I'm going to quote from your book here. After so many years of running, of winning, and then going nowhere fast, I was headed somewhere. For the first time in a while, I had a direction, north. So if you were to unpack that for me, is essentially what you just laid out? Is there more to it?
Well, there's more to it. I think for me, I've been doing the sport of ultramarathoning for over 20 years. And when I set off on the Appalachian Trail 3 years ago, I needed to get the passion and the fire back. I still love to run, but I didn't have that drive to go out and push my body to the edge, to really, go out and try and do something really big and push myself into maybe that state of success. And I feel like anybody probably, you don't have to run ultramarathons, can relate to this. Running was not getting old and boring, but I just didn't have that fire and that drive. And I remember at one point, and I mentioned this in the book, that my wife Jenny was like, just retire if you're not feeling like you want to go out and push me. Like, it's okay to retire. And I was fine showing up for races and just running them for fun and being a part of the community that I loved. And I think that's important, but there was still part of me that felt like, is there something else that I have left untapped? Is there something else that I could challenge myself with? And despite maybe that my best 100-mile racing days might have been over for the most part, just from a peak career standpoint and an athletic peak, there still were a few things I wanted to do. And running one of these long trails was something that I had always wanted to do, but I just never had done it. So I think that sentence really sums up what I was looking for, and that sense of direction. Yes, it was, getting north on the trail, the Appalachian in the literal sense, but it was also the direction that I needed in my life in terms of the sport that I had loved so much, but had kind of lost that passion, that drive, and that drive to really explore the boundaries. And I think anybody who finds that their career gets stale, or sometimes even a relationship, it's like finding a way to get that passion back. And that's really what the book North is about, is finding that passion, as much as it's, a story about running and hiking the Appalachian Trail for a record time.
What's interesting, hindsight's 2020, but as you're retelling the story in the book, you mentioned how, unlike the last 20 years, when you were extremely goal-driven, conquering the toughest races out there, the objective wasn't 100% clear when you started the hike. It's almost like you were winging it to some degree. Is that fair? Yeah,
I would say on a certain level. I mean, the one thing I should mention to people, it wasn't like we were totally unprepared. I mean, I had done this sport, and I had helped out friends on multi-day record attempts on some of the national scenic trails. So I've experienced enough to have the background. But one thing that Jenny and I didn't do is we weren't so nitpicky about the details and planning and strategy. We had a basic outline basically of what we were going to do each day and where I was going to get to and roughly the schedule. But beyond that, I wanted to leave something open. And I think a lot could be said, especially for somebody like myself who've been doing something for so many years. There was a sense of newness. There was a sense of the unknown and what could lie out there. And I didn't want to have this strategy that was so calculated that it didn't allow me the ability to get that passion back. I think if everything had been like laid out and I was so regimental and everything, I mean, I wanted basically I mentioned this in the book. I mean, I knew there were going to be a ton of problems along the way. And the fun part about the journey, and I think anybody can relate to this. I mean, we remember the hardest times. We remember typically the most difficult times in our life when things are going sideways and things went awry and totally threw us for a loop. And that's what I was going out there on the Appalachian Trail. And that's what Jenny, as well as a couple, we were also challenging our relationship in a whole completely different way. And I think that aspect of going out there, and maybe some people would call it winging it or not preparing to the nth degree, was something that I wanted to do because I needed it to be different. I didn't want it to be so calculated. The adventure had to occur, and there's definitely sometimes the greatest adventures happen when things don't go as planned, and I think anybody could relate to that. We don't always want it. We don't always want to encourage it. We don't want to, have disaster strike. But when it does happen and we make it through to the other side, alive and well, we're just like, man, that was so fun.
I mean, there's the winging it in terms of the prep, and I didn't think so much that you weren't, prepared, but it's the why.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you there, and why are you doing this? You knew that the fire had, dampened, if not been extinguished, and you needed something, but maybe all the dots weren't connected at that point. You just felt like, let me set my sights on this, and somehow going through this journey that this will bring something back that I've lost for a while.
Definitely. And for me, I looked at it as, this kind of pilgrimage. A lot of people have gone on long walks, and, why are there so many spiritual pilgrimages in religion and faith? And I believe walks and long endurance challenges are this sort of pilgrimage. We don't know what we're going to get along the way. And because we have to strip away the layers physically, mentally, spiritually, there are going to be things that are going to happen that we have no idea. And the why, after this whole experience, I don't know if we ever get to like that final answer, but we get little pieces along the way. And that's what I was looking for in doing something like this. I knew it would get me closer to the why. It would help me along the way. And I think, life is this never ending series of whys, of trying to get every ounce of our potential out of us and to keep learning and to keep challenging ourselves. And hopefully along the way, we get something out of it. And I knew there would be something at the end of that, 2,189 miles. What it was and, what I was going to get, I just didn't know. And I think that was part of the fun of it. And you took a sentence out of the beginning of the book, because Jenny and I mean, I was like a kid again. I had that passion, those first few days and that first week, and even all throughout the trail, I was tapping into that passion again. And it was a lot of fun.
As you alluded to earlier, you had to run through more than just excruciating pain on the trail, but actual injuries. I think just a week into the trail, you suffered both runner's knee, which is, those that don't run, it's severe irritation, inflammation to the cartilage under the kneecap, and a torn quadricep as well. I've had both of those. They're not pretty. They are debilitating. I mean, honestly, they knock out even the most diehard athletes, not for a day or two, for weeks. So how do you run through that?
It was extremely difficult. And I'm totally honest with people, because some people might assume, oh, well, you just don't have the same level of pain we all do, or you have a different pain tolerance. I mean, that was probably some of the most horrific pain I've had in the sport of ultra running and in my career, because there wasn't a way, like I couldn't really limp with my legs, because basically an injury was in each leg at the same time. And I didn't run. And this is what I tell a lot of people. The only way that I could recover from it was to decrease the stress. At the same time, I still needed to keep moving down the trail. So for me, again, here it goes back to this adaptation and this problem solving. I guess, tool set that I've developed over the years is that I was hoping in a lot of ways in my mind, I was like, it's over. And I mentioned this, and I won't go into, it won't be a spoiler alert here, but I go into great detail how I was actually more disappointed on what Jenny was going to think, my wife, who had spent basically, she was going to spend her summer out there helping me and sacrificed her time to help me on this quest that I had. And then here I'm going to already be done in a week. So all these things were running through my head. At the same time, I felt if I could just take a little bit of weight off of the injuries, putting more weight through my pulls, basically not running at all and just, hobbling slash slogging slash stumbling, however I could get down the trail and just be, okay, I'm going to try to put in as many miles, from sun up into the dark hours of night and just try and get 30, 40 miles. And I remember my buddy Horty, he told me, at some point your body's going to remember a way to heal itself. You've been doing this for 20 years of your life. Your body is going to be able to heal itself. And I'm a physical therapist. I have a background in musculoskeletal injuries. And at some point, though, it still seemed hard to fathom that I could heal. But if I could just take enough stress off of it and still maintain somewhat moving down the trail so I wasn't losing days and just totally taking days off, the body would find a way. And that's what I've been amazed at over the years is how much potential our body has. And again, I had to do all the things when I got off the trail. I was using pneumatic compression. I was icing. Sometimes I even walked with ice on my knee, which again, typically you don't do from a rehab standpoint, but I had to find a way to decrease the stress and just put enough stress on the body so that I could get down the trail. And that was really this stress management and this pain management strategy. And then of course, just bite my lip and just, put up with the discomfort because the pain was unbearable at times, but I just had to get through those really tough days. And for 2 days, it was pretty bad. But then I just started running a little bit more each day.
Well, beyond your wife and a few friends that you had to support you, you mentioned how there were a lot of people, not people you knew, strangers, supporting you along this journey. You talked about how your inner strength was complemented with the strength and the optimism of these people encouraging you along the way. So, in soccer and football, they refer to the home field advantage as the 12th man. We're all familiar with that. The 12th man, which gives you a huge lift because of the crowd support. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but is the emotional support you felt something along those lines that you knew that there are other people out there sort of really counting on you and maybe you're representing something for them?
Definitely. It's something that I didn't anticipate it being as strong as it was. I felt like there could be this element of, support, but it's amazing with as much as, today's technology is sometimes, downplayed or like, oh, it's ruining society. There was this aspect of even, Jenny would tell me at some point, these posts that would happen on social media and people would give me that little lift, even virtually, which is unbelievable. And then there were the people that did show up physically and were out there and spent miles with me. And it was the thru hikers along the way that I shared stories with and heard their story. And it was unlike anything I've ever experienced. And as crazy as it was having to deal with all these new people joining me and answer their questions, on one hand, some individuals, and I mentioned this, it might have been a deterrent or a detractor. It might have taken some of that life energy away from me to do what I needed to do. But on the other hand, it provided an immense amount of support and perspective. And it just, like you said, it was a 12th man effect. And maybe even beyond that, because people they were giving actual physical support too. We had people who I had to trust. And this was another element of like team. I had my close friends at time come out. And there were times when Jenny and I wanted to just be alone and be on our own, but we needed the help of locals, people that I had to trust and make sure that they were going to get me through. At one point I left in Maine 5 days out from the end of the journey with 2 strangers who I had never met before. And I was going to be running and hiking with them through the night and probably one of the most critical moments on the trail of those last 5 days. And here they are, joining me in a storm and, talk about switching up the platoon or, the team at the last moment. I was essentially playing with a completely new team. And, how are they going to provide the support that my close buddies who had seen me in all these different situations, or somebody like my wife who knows exactly what I need at the right time. So it's one of those things where it became even this completely other aspect of the journey that, to me, it wouldn't have been the same adventure without it. And I'm thankful for that. I can look back now at it as being like, at the time, sometimes it was just so crazy. And sometimes I'd have to tell people like, hey, I need some time alone. Can you just drop back a little bit? So I had to have that time to just kind of collect my thoughts and just be in my own mindset. And other times I needed that support and needed that help. And so it was really one of the most fascinating things I've ever done in my career, where I've really opened it up to other people, and people were so close to a very hard challenge and something that, athletically I was doing on another level that I'd never done before. And then all of a sudden now I have all these people joining me. So it was a really interesting dynamic, and something I would never have predicted to be as powerful and to be as an integral part of the journey.
Well, beyond the physical challenge of it all, you've got this sleep deprivation going on as well. It's not like you're getting 8-10 hours of sleep a night. So how do you, beyond popping some caffeine pills, grabbing a coffee, it's one thing to try to sit at a desk with less than ideal sleep, but to be able to jump up and run 50 miles again and again, how do you deal with that aspect?
The sleep deprivation was unbelievable. I mean, I'd gone through some, and I had experienced staying up for a couple of days straight, but the fact that I was getting just a couple of hours for days and actually weeks there at the end was just something. I there was no level of caffeine that was doing the trick. There was nothing that could keep me awake sometimes, and I literally was falling asleep while I was on some of the most treacherous terrain of the whole entire trail. Even New Hampshire, it seemed like I was basically walking down a dry waterfall. Anybody who's hiked through the White Mountains in New Hampshire knows what I'm talking about. It's basically, these slabs of rock that kind of just drop from, level to level. And there's trees that sometimes you can grab onto, and branches, roots mixed in with that. And so at times I was falling asleep down some of that terrain. And I thought to myself, like, that was the thing that would scare me the most. Waking up and realizing like I was sleeping on some of this terrain while my legs and body were moving. I just never experienced sleep deprivation on that level. And then to not be able to do some of the simple things cognitively and emotionally, I was brought to the brink. And I think maybe I experienced a little bit of what individuals do, like in the military, or individuals who are in healthcare and critical situations where they literally are staying up for days or a week or more at a time with very little sleep. And it's amazing. It brought a whole new appreciation to me of what the human body is capable of doing. We know the research that sleep is important, and I knew that I was not doing something that was good for my body, but at the same time, somehow I was able to find a way to keep doing what I needed to do on the trail. And it wasn't always pretty, but it's brought this whole new level of appreciation of the fact that, humans do need sleep, and it's ideal to get our 6 to 8 hours. And it's good to get restful sleep, but I was blown away with how consistent I could just fall asleep on a rock or a bed of the roughest, trail out there, and I could sleep for 10 minutes and feel like it was hours. And getting little naps where I just put myself in a very complete sleep for an hour, and sometimes it would feel like several hours. So it was a fascinating education for me, and I find that realm of sleep research to always be something that's changing. And this was a personal experimentation with that, even more than what I was hoping for.
At 2:05 p.m., July 12th, 2015, 46 days, 8 hours, 7 minutes after you began your journey, you set a new speed record on the Appalachian Trail at that point. You averaged nearly 50 miles a day and over 500,000 feet of elevation change for the 2,189-mile journey. What did that accomplishment mean for you?
Oh, it's hard to sum it up in words. Like I try to tell people it meant so many different things. And when I got to the top of the mountain, Jenny was there with me, and on that final climb, it was almost like I was reliving, the past 46 days, and I was getting like these flashbacks, and just all the struggles, all the things that we had been through, the good and the bad just seemed to be just kind of flipping through my brain, and just a reminder of that getting to the mountain wasn't the goal. And as much of it as it was on a one level, it was the goal. There was just so many other things that made that journey so special. While at the same time, breaking the record was amazing. It was also just what it took for both of us to get to the end of the trail, to get there, to break that record, and all the people that it took and their energy, and I don't know, it just felt like this whole network that brought me to another level. And it was a huge transformation. And I wish I could sum that up in words, but I would encourage the listeners, like, you just have to go out there and do something like that and experience it, and you'll know what I'm talking about. And I don't think we can put those things into words, or tell you like, oh, exactly, like, oh, this is what I learned, A, B, C, and D, and this is what I experienced. It's on another level, on another plane. And I think, well, I know that's why I do these things. I do these things because of that perspective, of that transformation that ideally will occur at the end of something like this.
Well, you set off on this journey searching for something that had been missing for a while. Did you find it?
Oh, definitely. I found it on that first couple days when I, felt like a kid again, and I was running down the trail and just everything was flowing right. I just felt amazing. And then I also found it when I was struggling and crawling and hobbling with injuries, or stumbling and sleep deprivation on the end of the trail, or crying in Jenny's arms in terms of just feeling like this is stupid. Why are we out here? This makes no sense. Like, we're just putting ourselves through so much emotional and physical stress that we just got to stop and go back home. And all of those things, I found that passion again. And I think it was a reminder that the passion can be reignited, and it can be found in so many different places that we least expect. I've also learned over the last couple of years since the trail that, it takes a while to get that passion up after doing something on that scale. So I think now I've discovered that, well, there was a reason maybe that I was kind of not lost, but just kind of not sure of what I was doing with my career, and maybe not as directional with it. And maybe not having that drive to really push those boundaries and go way out into that space that is very uncomfortable and very challenging and full of failure. So now, after a couple of years of recovering, I'm ready to go back to that place. And I think it's about taking that. Life ebbs and flows, and it's not always about going, pushing that gas pedal all the way down to the floor. You have to let back on it. And I think for me, the Appalachian Trail was, putting that gas pedal down to the floor. And then now it's about gaining a different perspective and kind of stepping away from that and realizing, like, I don't have to do that all the time, but I do need those challenges from time to time.
Where does this accomplishment rank for you compared to all the others you've had over your career?
I mean, it's incomparable. It's really hard to compare what this is. It's on another level.
Because the objectives were so different.
The objective was so big, so immense. The scale of something like this, 2,189 miles, doing 50 miles a day for 46 days. Physically, mentally, this was on a whole nother dimension, which is what I was looking for. I knew there was a reason I saved something like this for the end of my career. And the reason was I knew it was going to take everything out of me and maybe push me to the brink of destruction. And I think that's what we need in life. We need things that push us to that brink, and things that are very hard to face. And for me, there was just nothing else. I mean, doing 100 miles is hard, and it's a very intense, 16 hours, 15 hours, 17 hours type of thing. But the fact of getting out and every day waking up, and I mentioned this in the book, one of the most amazing things was finishing a day and feeling like, oh, I just, accomplished the day. I got through all the challenges, and wow, what a day was that. Just so psyched, so on this high. And then within an hour, I'd be like, I'm waking up in a few hours and doing this all over again. So in my career, I'd never had that. It was like, get through the struggle, get through the challenges, and then enjoy some rest at the end. Like, the finish line is there. Whereas this was, again, it was really it was really a journey, pilgrimage, vision quest, for lack of a better word. Like it was something even beyond that, because the scale and what I had to do physically and mentally each day, and mentally more than anything, that was the challenge. Like, how am I going to get up and do this again and again and again?
It sounds like, if I'm hearing you right, that you're gearing up for something new, a new challenge. Do you know what that is yet?
No, I'm not 100% sure. And I like to keep things low profile. I mentioned the Appalachian Trail literally the day before I set off. I didn't want that weight of, everybody like knowing and, that pressure over me. I just wanted to kind of keep it a surprise, kind of keep it my own thing. So Jenny's finally recovered as well, and we're excited about setting off. It's going to be a little bit more crazy with two little ones. We've got a 3-month-old and a 2-year-old now. So instead of just us, and it'll be a little bit more packed and compressed, and a whole nother aspect of the journey. But she's excited to get out and do something. So hopefully next year we'll be setting off on another big journey, and looking to inspiration in other sports and other visionaries that I like to follow, and try to find something that fascinates me, and do something that's completely different.
Have you ever contemplated the day? I hope it doesn't come for a long, long time, but the day when physically you're just not able to run anymore, or certainly run at this level?
It's something that I've contemplated a lot, because I've seen a lot of friends with injuries over the years, watch them, because I have a lot of friends. I mean, I'm in my 40s, but I've seen my friends in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s now, because I've been in the sport for so many years, and I've seen them physically and mentally, change and transition, and it's something that I've looked to. But I've always told myself this, and I know this is something, but if I were to lose the ability to run, whether it's, something traumatic or even mentally, just being like, hey, I don't want to run anymore. Like, I want to do something complete. I used to joke that I would take up surfing or something completely different later in my life, just to give myself a whole set of new challenges. But running is such an integral part of my life that I've also been okay with, I've accomplished a lot, and I've used it as a great tool. But if I were to lose the ability to run, I'd be okay with that. And I have a lot of friends where it's not been okay, even though they've been running for 30, 40 years of their life. They've really lost a part of themselves, and it's really been hard for them emotionally and mentally. It's been a real struggle. But for me, I've always felt like, running's not the end all be all. And a lot of people would assume that from what I do, but I would find something else to challenge myself. And after writing this book, I definitely don't I hope it's not writing, because writing is probably one of the hardest things I've done. Writing about the Appalachian Trail is way harder than actually doing it. Jenny and I were wishing that we could just go back on the Appalachian Trail and not write about it anymore, because it was so much easier at times to deal with sleep deprivation and injuries and 50 miles a day than actually write about it. So I think for me, I'd have to find other challenges. And seeing somebody so close to my life, like my mother, lose so many physical abilities at the prime of her life, and it just get worse and worse and worse, has been something where I've always felt like, if I couldn't do something, I try to find a different way to challenge myself.
But the key point there, you would have to have some type of challenge to keep you motivated, right? You need something to push yourself, it sounds like.
Not so much push myself, but I guess expand myself and learn. I feel like life is about learning. The word challenge, I shouldn't say like I need to I've got to always be doing something. However, I did grow up with Polish grandparents who are always working hard. Sometimes I find enjoyment in the simple things. I love to split wood and do, sometimes the most satisfying things is simple manual labor, as much as, and I guess what I do with running is a very manual task, but I wouldn't need to have something, huge and grandiose. I feel like life has its own set of challenges, but I think the one thing that I always want to make sure I do is keep an open mind and keep trying to expand my horizon, keep learning, because I feel like just sitting back and watching life go by has never been something I wanted to do. But I do enjoy the slow times. I think it's okay. I think some people need to always be doing something. And I definitely love the times like after an event or after something really big that I've done, and just take it easy. Enjoy the simple pleasures, and having children right now too, and watching them grow and taking the time to just hang out with them and watch them look at, the rocks and the plants on the trail, even though like we're moving at a snail's pace and we're not really getting very far. I'm okay with that. And I think that's important too, that life doesn't have to move at this really fast pace, goal oriented set to learn things. You can move at a slow pace. And I'm all about still sitting back, and I'll enjoy some time on the porch swing and hanging out. I don't want to make it sound like, I've always got to have a challenge, but I've always wanted, keep challenging myself and keep encouraging myself to keep learning and keeping an open mind. And I think that's important as human beings. I feel like a lot of the troubles we're in as society today is that we don't keep an open mind, and we're not open to other viewpoints and understanding people.
Yeah, I agree. Today more than ever. Scott, the name of this podcast is The Art of Excellence. This word excellence means different things to different people. I'm curious what it means to you.
Excellence to me means being the best that you can possibly be, and that there's no limit on that. There's no definition, and there's no end to it. I feel like, much like the Appalachian Trail for me, it wasn't like I was done. I wasn't finished. I did mention in the beginning of my book, and I mentioned this to a reporter way in the beginning of the journey, that I said that now this is like going to be my masterpiece, in the sense of like, this is going to be one of the biggest things I've done. But it wasn't like, oh, this is going to be like my last big thing, or the last thing that I could learn from, or that that I have an end point. So excellence to me doesn't have a cap. It doesn't have an end point. It should be something that we're always striving for, and it can mean a different thing for each individual. And it should be about not success in the material sense, but in terms of growth and trying to find our best selves.
I like that. I got to tell you, this is one of my favorite, if you want to call it, sports books ever. And because it's not just about setting the record, but you're very reflective in it, looking at life as a metaphor for running and what this meant to you, what was missing in your life, why you took it on. It was almost a journey for me reading through it, being a similar age you're in. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being on the show. This was really fun.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. You can subscribe to the show at iTunes, Stitcher, and theartofexcellence.com. I've got one small favor to ask. If you like the show, please take a minute and leave us a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate that. I'll see you next time.